This is the Erik the Travel Guy podcast.
Thank you, Aaron. The vacation super engine is up and running once again. It is the Erik the Travel Guy podcast. I am Erik. Thank you very much for being here. It's our premiere episode of our second season. I am so excited I can barely stand up. If you watch the preview, you know this podcast is all about where to go, what to do, and where to stay on your next vacation in the hopes that you will make the most out of your next getaway. It's just as simple as that. And let me tell you, today's episode is no exception. In the Vacation VIP Spotlight, we have travel royalty joining us. Yes, that's right. There is no better expert in all things Italy than the very person who is going to join us on this podcast. Now, I don't want to make it about them. I don't want to make it about me. I want to make it about you. And I am serious as a heart attack when I say to you, I really do want you to start thinking about where that next getaway is going to be. And you probably are already thinking about it. Most of you think about travel so often you don't even realize it, because it begs the question, what is travel? You know what I mean? So we're going to get into all of that, because that's what this dialogue is all about. That's what this conversation is about. As a matter of fact, let's put it on a little bit of a timeline here. I'm going to challenge you for 1 second. We're going back to 1997, November 1st, okay? That was the day that the world got a first-hand glimpse of what would become one of the highest grossing movies of all time. November 1st, 1997. Can you guess what it was? That's right, James Cameron's Titanic. Now, the only reason I mention that debuted at the Japanese Film Festival 1997, and the only reason I mention that is because some of you are still just as fascinated about this maritime disaster today as ever, and there are ways for you to experience a Titanic vacation. Sounds a little macabre, but I think you know what I mean, to learn more about this tragedy that took place. But the question I have for you, that's what brings us to a little vacation trivia. Let me ask you this. Where do you believe is the world's largest permanent collection of Titanic artifacts? All right, we've got some options here. Is it A, Las Vegas, B, Southampton, C, Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, or D, New York City? The answer may surprise you. Yes, I'm looking at it right here in my notes. I've got it. The answer is C, Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. That's I heard Dolly is really excited about the Titanic. That's right. We've got the largest collection, more than 400 artifacts, including rare items like a life jacket worn by a survivor, the violin played by the band leader, Wallace Hartley, during the ship's final moments, and they've also got life-size replicas of the Grand Staircase and other sections of the ship. So there you go. Now, there is an article I wrote about taking a Titanic-sized vacation. If you would like to see some of those artifacts in Pigeon Forge, they've also got a museum in Branson, Missouri. You can see things in New York City that have the remnants of the White Star Line, also Southampton, Halifax, Nova Scotia, and others around the world. Just go to erikthetravelguy.com. That's where we post all of the links from each of our podcast episodes. You just look at the episode page for this particular episode. You'll find those links there. It's really fascinating stuff. As a matter of fact, I mention this because we have Titanic merchandise at my Etsy shop, and people buy it. Coffee mugs, hoodies. If you love it, like I do, I'm totally fascinated by it. The other item worth noting today, people are always asking me, how do I get the best deal on my airfare? So we're going to start I don't know if it's going to be like a 3-part series or a 5-part series on how to get the best airfare, the cheapest airfare. And again, this is a very, very relative topic, because I think anybody that says this is the only way to get the best or this is the best way, I think they're kind of full of it, because it's very subjective, and because travel is very personal, the things that are important to you may not be important to someone else and vice versa. So price, of course, is relevant. What you're really asking about is value, and I certainly recognize the importance of that. But how to get the best price, one of the first things I will tell you, and this is what we'll talk about today, and then we're going to move on because I got to get to our special guest. You are going to absolutely love this person because I love talking about Italy. That being said, how do you get the best deal on your airfare? Well, one of the factors that I would strongly encourage you to understand and have a full knowledge base of is your home airport. It's very important to understand your home airport. It's very important to understand the airports that are within a 90 minutes drive of you as well. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Those of you that perhaps live in Des Moines, Iowa, sometimes you'll even drive down to Kansas City to catch a flight because the airfare, et cetera. But understanding your home airport, and here's what I mean by that. If you want to get the best price, we're going to have to look for supply and demand here. That's going to come in to play. Well, if you live in, say, I don't know, Dallas-Fort Worth, okay? Well, Dallas-Love Field, you're a Southwest person. Or you're an American person because you fly out of DFW. That means American has the largest presence at that airport. And with a larger presence comes more flights and better flexibility. And that's the most important thing to note when you start dealing with. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the lowest fare, but it does mean here's where it really comes into play. It means that statistically speaking, you'll probably be flying on American Airlines more frequently than you would be, say, on United. Now, if you're in Houston, you're probably a United person. They have the biggest number of gates there, or the most number of gates, I should say there, or the most number of takeoffs and landings, depending upon how you look at it all. But again, I would encourage you to go to your local airport's website and look up the airlines that are available to you that fly there. And the reason is because I want you to be familiar with both the legacy carriers, that'd be American, Delta, United, Southwest, and then some of the smaller carriers that are getting larger by the moment, JetBlue, Alaska, which is just merged with Hawaiian, be familiar, and then the low-cost carriers as well, because you will find that sometimes a Spirit or an Allegiant or a Frontier might serve your needs, and you might understand that maybe there's only 1 or 2 departures a day as opposed to 150 like United or Delta or American. For instance, if you are, speaking of Delta, if you're in Atlanta, you're probably a Delta person. They have the largest number of gates in the busiest airport in the world, Atlanta, Hartsfield, Jackson Airport, or Jackson Hartsfield. I always forget which one that is. I don't really fly Delta as much as I could, but anywho, that's the first step. And here is how that's all relative. So now you understand who's flying around, where you're going, what are the nonstop flights. And furthermore, if you're going to get a credit card and start earning miles, I would suggest you start earning miles with the airline that you're going to travel most likely the most frequently. Does that make sense? So people say, yeah, get a credit card. Now, don't charge your vacation. We've talked about that before. It's very important not to finance your vacation. I'm talking about buying everyday things or buying travel and paying it off right away and earning miles for that, or earning points. It could be converted to miles to an airline of your choice. So when you're thinking about getting a credit card like that, ask those questions, because that, to me, is super, super important. But that's just one of the factors to help you get the best price as you shop for airfare coming up. Here it is, November already. I hope you already have your Thanksgiving plans and your holiday plans already booked, because if not, you're going to start to pay a huge premium as the clock ticks down closer to those holidays. All right, that's it for me, because I cannot wait for you to meet travel royalty. Her name is Linda Perillo, and she's going to join us next. Thank you for being here on this particular edition of the Erik the Travel Guy podcast.
This is the Erik the Travel Guy podcast.
Yes, shining bright in our vacation spotlight is a family member of what I would consider to be vacation royalty. You have heard, well, I'm just saying, let's call it what it is. Everybody's heard of Mario. That's right. They've heard of Mario Perillo. But what they may not know is that it was actually Joseph Perillo started Perillo Tours, I think it was back in 1945, up in the Bronx.
Correct.
And today, on the very first return episode of the podcast, we have talking all things Italy and whatever else she wants to talk about, the great, the wonderful Linda Perillo. I'm so happy you're here.
And I am so happy to be with you, Erik Hastings. You have no idea. Privilege, honor, fun, everything rolled into a crappy Monday. How's that?
I mean, I can't think of a better person to have on the first return episode of my podcast, because as you and I, we've been friends a long time, and in the full disclosure, nobody's paying anything to be here today. No, I mentioned Perillo Tours. Hello. Yeah, when does the check come in? This is ridiculous.
Where's the check?
I mentioned here's the check. Wait a minute. You're supposed to pay me. What are you talking about? This is a giant scam. Oh, I mentioned Perillo Tours, and I am happy to do it because, frankly, there aren't that many brands that are based on a person that have been in the travel business a long time and stayed in the travel business a long time. Yeah. It's a hard business to stay in.
It's funny because I was actually just talking to my husband about this the other day. When you think of what my father did, and he never gave up, right? He just never gave up, because to get to this point, 45 years later, where you are, he's passed on, but travel mogul, like you said, Erik, the business is still running beautifully even after COVID, when so many people didn't make it. And the reason is because he had his own legacy, right? Mario had to live up to Mario and to Mario's expectations. And then that branched out into having to live up to what people knew Perillo was about. So P.S. at the end of the story, people still see me and will go, he's been gone 22 years. He encapsulated a good person just through a commercial, someone that really loved his homeland just through a commercial. And then once he got you in, he did all the right things to keep the flow of customers. And we have repeats and we have legacy customers, and it just goes on and on. So to answer your question, because I do talk a lot, it's multifaceted, right? It really, it invokes a lot of feeling and thought. And
well, I think I think what's an interesting topic to discuss briefly, and I know we have other things to talk about. I want to talk Italian gateway cities. I want to talk first timers. I want to talk about return timers who have done the Venice and the Rome and the Milan. But we're going to get to that, because the thing is, when we talk about Mario Perillo and we talk about the man, and I know a lot about him, as obviously you do, being your father. But the thing is, it's very difficult to separate him from the business, because he was the business. And frankly, his drive, his determination will only get you so far, because at the end of the day, the product, the wares he's selling have to be sustainable. In other words, they have to be good, or people don't come back. Right? Well, I mean, he could be a nice guy. He can be a determined guy. But if he's shoveling crap, okay, you can make a lot of money shoveling crap, but not
a lot of
for
people
as long.
Do, right?
Well, they do, but he wasn't one of those guys. He really believed in, and I think obviously it comes from, I don't know where it comes from, but he believed in a quality product, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's what he wanted. He loved his home, but he believed in the product itself, right?
So, yeah, well, I have to tap into that real quick to tell you something that he said when I was working with him. He said this industry is hard, and he was, Mr. Ethics, right? He was completely did everything right, the way I saw him in my eyes all the time. And one of the things he said to me, what's difficult about the travel industry, and I'm gonna say the hospitality industry in general, is
fine.
You can't return it. You can't give somebody back their health, their time, their children's ages when they traveled, their life savings that they spent to do this, because a lot of people do that. So you are responsible for something so emotional, whereas you can return a shirt, you can return a bad product to Walmart or wherever the flip you got it,
Right.
Target, wherever.
Right.
You can't return somebody's time. That's something none of us will ever get back. And he was very, very cognizant of that. And that's what drove him.
And isn't that funny? Because, time is the only thing that we withdraw at will with no idea what the balance is. You go to the ATM, you take $100 out,
Right.
and maybe you look at the balance, but there's at least $100 in there. There's $1,000 in there. 10,000. You take out $100 because you need some cash, some flash money. But we take the time, we withdraw that all day long, and we don't know when it goes down to zero. Could be today. Could be tomorrow.
Right. That's right. That's right.
And I think that's one of the things. Yeah, one of the things he certainly understands. You understand. I understand. And I think that's one of the things that drives us. We say, well, and we talked about this even in the little preview of if you're working hard, you're saving money, you're taking care of yourself, you're taking care of your family. You got the aging parents that are now in the retirement home. You got to take care of them, and you got to do all this. Well, what are you doing it all for if you're not going on vacation?
Right.
And taking a break. What's it all for? To give it to your kids? You can't take it with you.
No, you can't. And you got to, my father always said, listen, the Asians always have the right recipe for everything. And one of the things that the Asians do, especially the Japanese, is they say, you must go on vacation. Because they know when you go on vacation and you take that time with yourself, your family, whatever, you're going to come back almost like a refurbished person, right? And if you don't take that time to go away, you're just a grump and a grouch because you didn't have time to unleash, unwind, and spend quality time with your family. So, but that again, that's where things become fragile. That's where you have to deliver. Right? You understand what I'm saying here, right? You have to deliver. You can't go back to your boss and say, listen, this vacation was horrendous. So listen, it wasn't worth it. I need another 2 weeks off.
I need another 2 weeks off. Yeah.
You're not getting that.
Back to work. Well, you bring up a great point. And maybe I will, I'm going to investigate that this week. I'm going to put some thought into that. You, Linda Perillo, you always do this to me. You always say things that trigger. But I think maybe next week, and I haven't done it yet, every week, everything that we talk about on the podcast always goes to the website, erikthetravelguy.com. Okay. All the links we're talking about, that all goes there so that nobody has to remember everything we talk about. It's all there for them. And I haven't written this yet, but I think this week I'm going to write an article. We'll do a segment on it called How to Take a Vacation. And the only reason I'm going to write that is that I did get a note from somebody who I could tell had the desire to go somewhere, but I could tell she couldn't figure out, or she was having a hard time figuring out what it was going to be like for her. So things like, because to your point, you can go to Italy, but if you don't go to Italy and want to be there and commit to taking time away, frankly, you're going to bring all that baggage with you, and you're not going to like it. It's not going to be fun. It's going to be stressful. You will be exposed to the underbelly of vacation, which is very stressful, I might add.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we'll talk about that. The notion of, what do we mean by unplugging? What does that mean? What does it mean to do nothing? Because you don't always have to be doing something. You need to be being. And I think places like Italy have certainly, don't you think that places like Italy and many thousands of others around the world do help you do that?
Oh my goodness.
I mean, really, think about that.
It's true. Because I was just there actually 2 weeks ago. My son got married in Florence. And, we were there as kind of a whirlwind, couple of days. But P.S., to your point, right, you realize when you're there that they live a very different lifestyle. And it reminds us that you have to slow down. And we have to slow down here. And that's what vacation really is all about. And I just think as a culture, right, as Americans, we don't have that mindset. In order to have that mindset, we have to get out of our own head and out of our own space. And the only way to do that is to trip off somewhere in wherever. Italy, listen, Italy's my place. Just take me there. But they live a very different kind of lifestyle that we should really kind of imbibe in, but we can't because it's not part of our culture. So PS, what does travel do? It takes us out of our daily routine and maybe gets us to relax or think or dream or sleep a little more, take a longer nap, like all these things that we wouldn't do that we need to do to stay healthy.
Well, I think it's a good point because if you think you're just, look, I can't speak for you, Linda, because I know you just celebrated your 35th birthday. But for those of us that are aging a little faster than we thought we were going to, or certainly would like to, don't wait until retirement, because you've seen those pictures. I love seeing the pictures of the old people out in these gorgeous places napping, because that's, they're exhausted from a lifetime of toiling.
Yeah.
And then they go to Egypt and they fall asleep on the bus, and they fall asleep on the park bench, and they fall asleep in how many hotel lobbies have you walked through and seen 10 or 12 senior citizens, just usually dudes, napping in the lobby? I mean, they're just
CPAP machines all over the place.
They can't help it. They got old. I'm old. So it's like, no.
A walker.
The time to go.
Tennis ball. Yeah, I know.
The time to go is now, while you still can, while you can still walk, for heaven's sake.
I know.
All right. I want to talk about these starter gateway cities. And would you help me kind of define for us what a gateway city really is from the United States into Italy? What do we mean by that? Because you'll hear people say, well, you got to go into an international gateway, blah, blah, blah. What does that mean exactly?
Well, let me start by saying this. Every time, can't begin to tell you how many times people say to me, oh, I told you this, Erik, my favorite scenario is, we want a farmhouse in Tuscany. And I go, oh, you do? So what's in your head about this flipping farmhouse? What do you think? Just tell me we're going to go here, we're going to go there. No, you're not. Okay? Make that your 5th trip to Italy when you visited every other important place. So to start with that, your gateways, I've heard people say they don't want to go to Rome. To me, that's the first place you should visit. It's too metropolitan. It's too much of a city. It is the eternal city. And there's a reason it is dubbed the eternal city. It is amazing. Am I right? It's
100%, 100%, 100%. You cannot start anywhere else, in my opinion. Now, you'll be there for 2 days, 3 days. It doesn't matter, as long as you go and see the top 3.
Yep.
If that's all you did, you know what struck me, and I love all the ancient stuff, don't get me wrong, but what really got me were the baths of Caracalla,
where they do operas there during the summer.
That's one of those things. When I keep saying on this podcast and others, when I do the newsletter, we say we never know which one of these trips is going to change your life forever. Like, because you just don't know unless you go and do it. You would think it's the Colosseum or maybe the Parthenon or whatever. But for me, where I looked at the baths and was like, oh my gosh, that was amazing to me. I don't know why. I still don't, but it just was.
I saw Aida there when I was a little girl. My mother she was very into culturing her little daughter. And I just remember the elephant. But I remember going to Caracalla as a little girl in the summertime, and it's an amazing, amazing experience, right? But so is the Vatican. Someone said, well, why do I want to go to St. Peter's? I mean, it's just another church. Italy's full of churches. It is not just a church. It is a basilica. So let me tell you something about basilica. Erik?
Yes.
Okay. What is the king of herbs? I just gave you the answer, but come on.
The king of herbs?
The king of herbs would be?
Basil.
Excellent. So that comes from basilica, which is the king of all churches, right? So it's not just the church, St. Peter's Church. We're talking St. Peter's Basilica. Okay, it is the Roman Catholic Mecca, so to speak, Mecca in loose terms, right? Because there is actual Mecca. But
Right.
you go there, and it tells every story of Roman history, not just Catholicism, but of the history of Rome, right?
Yeah.
The popes ruled the world. They ruled everything. And they weren't such nice people, and they weren't clean, and they weren't pristine, and they were a bunch of slobs, but they ruled the Roman Empire. The religion ruled the world. So you're not only just going there to see those things, the tombs and the cat, the under tombs, I forget what they call them. I can't think right now. But
Catacombs.
no, the catacombs are not there. There's another name for the tombs that are underneath, but
Oh yeah, what are
of the dead popes that somehow, well,
Yes.
because Italians are macabre crepe hangers, so they like to keep people alive even when they're not alive, and they have done this with their popes. Anyway, so you're seeing a whole basket of history. So to go to Rome or go to Italy and not see that where it all started, to me is like, what are you doing? It's
Well,
like,
again, that
I don't get it.
Yeah. No, I don't get it either. And this gets back to the whole on the beaten path versus off. And I can tell you, my friends, Gary and Luli Littman, are very well traveled, and they love to travel, and they do travel. Now they bring their kids with them. They are the people that can do the Tuscany village,
right?
The farmhouse. They are,
right,
because they love going to Rome, and they went to Venice, and they said they did all that, and they were happy that they did. But now they can do that because, again, once you're done with Rome, if you're not doing Rome, what would you say another? Venice?
Yeah, so I would think your number one gateway is Rome. Forget Milan. People say I want to go to Milan. Why do you go to Milan? It's like going to New York. It's cold. It's industrial. It borders Switzerland and France. You're getting that you're getting that vibe up there. I don't love it, right? So my next gateway, because I'm not a huge fan of Florence, and I hate to say I'm not. I am for certain reasons, but it's not my first pick. Venice is Venice is Venice is Venice. There's no place like it. However, you don't need a week, 2, 3 days, maybe 3 nights, whatever, to imbibe in the beauty that is Venice. And but you need to see it. You need to be there. You need to see it, right? So, and there's no place like it in the world. And then I would do Florence, because listen, our 3 jewels, right? When we do 3 cities, I forget which tour of ours is just the 3 wonders or 3 jewels or something. It's Rome, Florence, and Venice, but it's for a reason. We didn't just make it up and say, hey, you know what? I like Florence, let's throw Florence in there. No, there's a reason. And those are your gateways. And then from there, you have to remember that every region has something that's important, right? So if you go to Venice, well, go to Padua too, and see St. Anthony's tongue and his teeth and his jaw, because the Italians are freaking nuts, and they maintain that too. And then from Florence, you can go to Siena and see St. Catherine's head in her church. Like, there's so much more. Orvieto, all those cities that are around, that are between actually your 2 regions there, right? So there's so much more to be seen, even if you used one of your gateways as a base, right?
Yeah.
As your and then everything else is just a runoff. Even if you did some day trips and stuff, it's
that's I think it's so important. I think you're right, because again, using a gateway as the very thing that we're talking about, the number one thing you're going to have to figure out is, if you haven't done international travel before, maybe this is your first trip. Italy, much like Ireland, much like the UK certainly, or France, these are what I would consider to be starter destinations. These are starter European places that you as Americans can navigate, easy to do. But again, it's still a foreign country. It will still be different. So if you're in Rome for a few days, there's a lot more infrastructure in place. And what I mean by that is tourism infrastructure that they're used to. You go to New York City, New Yorkers and people in the city itself, they are used to it. You talk about the tourist corridor between Central Park South of 34th Street and 5th Avenue to basically 9th Avenue. That's called the tourist corridor. If you work or live in that you see tourists all day long.
Right.
all day long. Where's the closest ATM? It's over there. You know what I mean? Like they are used to it. Same in Rome. They're used to, and again, Linda, what's great about that is that you can come home. If you include Rome in your Italy trip, then you get to come home and say, yeah, I went to 2 countries on my vacation.
That is
and people
correct,
will go,
Eric.
what do you mean? I thought you just went to Italy. No, I got to go to the Vatican City. It's its own country. I love stuff like that where you're like, oh, I did learn that is. Right, I know, right?
Eric.
But it's true. I love things like that where you're like,
true.
you know, we went and we had liter dolcia when we were there in Rome. You know what that is? I probably mispronounced it. My friend Ken would be so disappointed in my pronunciation.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, you know what it is? It's French toast.
What did they call it?
If I'm pronouncing it right, aliter dolcia.
Dolce is sweet. I got to look this up, man.
Yeah, look it up. Look at Linda. This is what I'm talking about. This is the kind of stuff the Romans, they used to take bread, dip it in egg. We're talking about like, you know, this is not yesterday. Dip it in bread and then fry it. That would be French toast. Yeah.
Smart, right?
Crazy,
smart.
right?
All their cooking is smart. Eric, all their cooking is smart. And all their cooking, because we could do a whole other segment on Italian cooking. Yeah. It's peasant-based. It was all created by what they had on hand. Nobody was freaking going to the store. It's like, oh, we have a chicken today? Great.
You know what I learned?
Let's figure this out.
You know what? I did learn the French toast thing because I was interested. You've heard of like the carbonara. That kind of modern day recipe comes from Rome. You've got Roman
cream.
Yeah, no cream. You've got all this. So you've got these very specific. I'll tell you what I did learn that I loved hearing about when I read earlier this week about the Romans who, if you were, you know, the rabble, you lived in an apartment essentially in the city on the 2nd or 3rd floor. These are 5-story buildings. Well, you didn't have an oven. Like you wouldn't, but what you would do is leave to eat a hot meal. So you would go to these food stands or restaurants where you would stand. Sometimes you could sit, but I love the fact that takeout was a part of Roman culture in the 1st century. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's a cool, and to capitalize on what you were talking about is that, right. It was all peasant food. That's where it was. I mean, they ate peacocks and they ate flamingos, but a very small percentage of the very tippity top ate, dormice and various strange things.
I cannot. However, that is
delicious.
What was available to them at the time.
Yeah. But again, it's so funny. Like I can imagine these conversations you must have where people say, well, why would I do that? You say, well, just pick why. Oh, you don't like history? You don't care about history? Fine. Go to Rome and eat your way. Oh, yeah. I'm on a diet.
Then
fine.
don't go
to Rome and no. That's my point. Go to Italy and just drink wine for a week.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you don't want to eat? You have crackers and fine. That's fine.
I got to tell you, because they don't you do walk a lot, right? We know this in Italy. And they do not use or very little, scant amounts of processed foods. You're eating much better quality, and you can eat a feast and you still will not gain any weight, and you can come back and you're going to be a lot healthier. Everything there is just healthier. Period.
All right. Before we go, let's just talk Rome real quick. What's the difference between when people are going to start doing their research and really digging into Italy, they're going to find there's kind of a thing between northern and southern. What's the definition? How do you define? What's the difference between staying in the north versus staying in the south or crossing over? How do you define that?
Well, it depends. I think it depends what you're looking for, right? I prefer the south, right? So anything from Rome down is considered south. And Rome is like, even though it's not exactly central, it divides the north and the south, which I guess historically, right, it would, because it was the capital and everything happened there. So, Southern hospitality doesn't change just because you're in it, you're not in the United States. So, you get a much warmer climate, a warmer group of people. Your food is very different down there. They use more vegetation, a lot of tomatoes. A lot, especially from the further south, you get a lot of amazing seafood. As you go north, the only place where you could trust any seafood would be where? Would be Venice, because it is an open port. So they fish constantly. But as you go further north, again, the people change. I told you that before. When you're bordering Switzerland, you're bordering France, you're bordering Germany. These are not the warmest cultures. Italy is a warm culture. And so the further south you move, you get that. But north, listen, you want to eat good boar, you want to eat prosciutto, you want to eat parmigiano from Parma, have at it. I mean, everything in Italy it's not what's better, it's how does it differ, right? What am I expecting in a region? What am I expecting in north and south? I prefer to go south. I love Sorrento. I love the whole area. I love Amalfi. It's amazing to me, and it's beautiful. It has to be done the right way because it can be extremely touristy. Capri, Americans like to say capri, like the pants. It's Capri. And again, gets crazy, crowded, touristy. You got to learn how to navigate, but you have to go. It's so beautiful. The Fariglioni, the Blue Grotto, and it's just an amazing area. I prefer as opposed to north.
We are talking with Linda Perillo because, well, how could we not talk Italy on our first episode? And who better? Steve, your brother, who I have talked with many a times, Steven, and adore him. It's not that. And we love Steve running the company these days. Perillo Tours, still in business since 1945, helping people understand and take these vacations. It's really, again, not paid to be here. Linda, you're my friend, and I love you dearly. What time of year? What's the peak season? What's the best time, in your opinion, to go?
In my opinion, to go, well, so Italy gets incredibly hot in the summer. I don't care where you are, north, south. I mean, obviously the south is going to get incredibly hot. So I think my favorite times, if I had to pick a time, temperature-wise, where it was comfortable and not as crazy crowded, you want to go April, May. And then you want to go on the other side of September. Although I will tell you, September and October are becoming a very busy time for us. They're becoming a high season because people are traveling when kids go back to school and it's not as crowded with families and things like that. And the weather is more temperate. Although I have to tell you, September can be warm there, and October can be warm until you get to the end of October. So May, I would do April, May. I would do September, October.
Duration, minimum 5 days.
Minimum 10. Especially if you're a first timer. Eric, you're asking the wrong person. Minimum to me is 3 weeks. I would say minimum first timer.
Minimum to me is 3 weeks. We're not moving there, Linda. Stop it already. People will be like, yeah, I do work for a living. Give me a break.
You can work virtually. See what we're doing today? This is all virtual.
None of this is real. Are you kidding me?
10 days minimum. Remember, day 1, day 10 are what? Travel days.
Travel days. Yeah.
Okay,
right.
so they don't
count.
About this. So you're getting 8 days on land, and the first day when you land, that's like half your day is gone already. So that boils down to a week. 10 days.
Okay. So Linda says 3 weeks minimum. I say 7 days minimum. Whatever. Do what you got to do. It's fine. Thank you for doing this today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We will do this again. We'll talk about Palermo next time. We should talk about Sicily. Talk about like beautiful. A second tier, people don't go to Palermo first, and they shouldn't. I think you're right. I think they should go to Rome, to Venice, to Pisa and Florence and whatever, and then move on to other places. Thank you, dear. Always good to see you.
Thank you, Eric, and a pleasure. Thanks for having me today.
I told you, Linda is the best. This is what I am talking about. Don't forget, everything that we talk about on this particular podcast is backed up on the website, erikthetravelguy.com. You can listen to this podcast wherever you get your podcast, at Spotify or Apple Podcast, or you can watch it. Yes, you can see my long hair. You can watch it on YouTube. We release it. We have new episodes every Thursday at 5:30 in the morning. Yes, well, we release it. We don't record it then, but that's when we release it. So I appreciate you being here. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again next week. Happy travels.